Greetings everyone, I hope you are fine, I hope you are doing well. I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate Nigeria for celebrating their Independence Day. That's a good thing. But I just want to say Africa is not yet fully liberated. So people should be aware of that. The reason I say so is because there are many African leaders who still make decisions by the guidance or through the guidance of the West. At the end of the day, they end up signing those bills, implementing those decisions without consulting their people. In other words, if the West says this is what you need to do, they go ahead and implement those decisions, irregardless of what is happening in their communities or in their countries. Even if the decision is against the community, they will still go ahead and implement those decisions. So that is why I don't believe that Africa is fully liberated. And therefore, I just want to say it should not be threatening to talk about African issues in Africa, African challenges, what people are going through in Africa. It should not be threatening at all. So where am I going with this? It's because I just want to take this moment to talk about Judge Hlophe. The only mistake he made is to speak on behalf of the poor, to speak on behalf of the defenseless, to speak on behalf of those who are vulnerable. He didn't start now. He didn't start maybe this year or maybe last year, because if you look into the profile of Judge Hlophe, you'll discover that this is the man who's been fighting for the justice of the Africans, fighting for the defenseless. And that is why he's going through what he's going through right now, because there's no way you can speak on behalf of the poor, you can speak for justice and go free. There's no way you can speak about justice and speak for the defenseless and never encounter any difficulties. Your life will never be smooth at all. This is what is happening. But here is the thing. It should not be a threat to speak about African issues in Africa. But that's the only mistake that Judge Hlophe made.
My question to you, President, is this. Through what magic do you hope to forge a national unity of the oppressor and the oppressed, the exploiter and the exploited? The rich capitalists and the rich capitalists and the toiling and exploited working class.
Judge Hlophe is holding these people accountable, because if you don't hold them accountable, they'll keep on exploiting people. They'll keep on exploiting workers, because right now as we speak, who is exploiting the workers? The workers are being exploited by mining companies, retail companies, and all these different kinds of companies, because the focus is on money. Their focus is on profit. So as a result, they don't care about the well-being of the people. So that is why they keep on exploiting these workers. So that is why right now as we speak, some political parties in this GNU are in demand of minimum wage being scrapped or minimum wage being removed. Why? So that these companies can have power, so that these companies can be in control, so that no one can hold these people accountable. You know, other people have their own views, but here is the thing: as long as workers are not protected, then there's gonna be a problem. So this is what they want. This is what they want. But if you speak on behalf of those who are poor, those who cannot defend themselves, there's no way your life can be smooth. There's no way your life can be okay. Because if you want your life to be okay, you just need to be a sellout and a betrayer. Then in that way, your life will be smooth. In other words, the economy will love you. Whenever you speak, then the economy will perform well. Why? Because you are not disturbing anything. You are not a disturber. That is why he's blocked to participate in JSC. And remember, JSC, or one of the main functions of JSC, is to appoint judges, to interview judges, and maybe to advise government when it comes to the issues of justice. This is their main function. So they don't want anyone like Judge Hlophe to come close. They don't want anyone. So that is why they'll go to court, they'll do 1, 2, 3, and in other words, they'll try by all means to frustrate you. That is why I always say this thing of thinking that no one is above the law is a scam, is a trash. There are people who are above the law. That is why the law has been made expensive. That is why if you are poor, you cannot just take government to court just like that. It's impossible. Why? Because you have to go through the expensive law. In other words, this expensive law is like a steep that should be difficult for you to climb. This is the steep that has been made for poor people not to climb, or to find it difficult to climb.
The restitution, rather, of land to black South Africans remains a yardstick against which sellout ANC and DA-GNU government, against which your performance will be measured. Land has symbolic value to us. It means so much to us. In a similar vein, President Luthuli of the ANC once declared the following. He said, "Without land, there is no dignity." Our own President, uMkhonto, said the following. He said the following, "Inkinga zethu zaqala ngesikhathi kufika abamhlophe kuleli. Bathatha umhlaba wethu, bathatha nomcebo wethu, bafika nomthetho wabo, bazenzela unothanda nje. Namhlanje asinamhlaba, namhlanje asinamfuyo, konke kwathathwa ngesihluku."
Another mistake that Judge Hlophe made is to speak about the land, or to emphasize on the issues of the land. We're living in the country whereby you are not allowed to talk about the land. So every time you talk about the land, you have to say, black people cannot do anything with the land. Black people don't qualify to work the land. Black people will collapse the economy if they can be in charge of the land. Why? Because they use all these broken municipalities as an example to say, you know what? You can see, we've given black people an opportunity and they are failing. And they are also using all these farmers who didn't get enough resources to work the land, who don't know anything about the land, or some of them, or most of them. So they are using all these examples as an example to say, you know what, black people cannot win. And there are other black people again who are programmed. I remember many years ago, after EFF was formed, I was like talking with this other gentleman, and I was like, now In other words, there's hope. Economy will start doing well, and we are going to get the land back under the leadership of EFF. And we were just like talking, and he was like, there's no way we should not take the land back, because if we take the land, the economy is going to collapse, and black people are not equipped. Black people don't know anything about the land. And I was shocked that we have people who can speak like this, black people to be exact. And these are people who are loved by the world whenever they speak. But here's the thing. If you speak like Judge Hlophe, obvious, your life will never be smooth. Your life will never be smooth.
uMkhonto says, we believe that the land belongs to the nation and the land belongs to the people. South Africa is a country which has a problem to do with inequality. It reported that 80% of the country's wealth was in the hands of 10% of the population. And it is the black population who factor most in the poorest category. The report places the blame for the income disparities directly on race. The legacy of colonialism and apartheid, rooted in racial segregation, continues to reinforce inequality in South Africa, the report stated. This is clear proof that the end of formal apartheid in 1994 did not end the real problems that we have in this country. And against that, I'm asking you, President, how are you hoping to sustain the so-called government of national unity when your interests are fundamentally and diametrically opposed in the so-called government of national unity?
Another mistake Judge Hlophe made, it was to talk about colonialism. The fact that the legacy of colonialism has not yet been fully addressed. You cannot talk about the legacy of colonialism and still expect your life to be smooth, because there are people who believe in colonialism. The economy believes in colonialism. Many things believe in colonialism, because if you look at the stats, South Africa is one of the most unequal states or unequal countries in the world, because this is where you find that 80% of the people in South Africa are black. 80% black. But the economy is 99% white. In other words, this is pure unequal. This is pure unequal, because now there's no way. There's no country in the world, even those countries that are being led by puppets, there's no way. 80% black, but economy is 99% white. That is why I always say Africa is not yet fully liberated, because in Africa, again, there are other countries who are like 99% black or 95% black, but the economy is like 99% white. Just imagine, this is what is happening. So if you talk about to address the legacy of colonialism, obvious the system will always be against. The system will attack you. The system will stop you. So whenever these judges make decisions, they also make decisions based on the influence, based on the influence, because you have to understand that politics have power. That is why they don't want anyone who is going to come close to justice and talk about land and talk about addressing the injustices of the past and addressing all these things. They don't want anyone to come close.
When we were colonized, we had our own systems of justice in place. African customary law, which is close to our heart. Colonization brought with it a foreign legal system, Roman Dutch law, and this was done in order to protect and preserve the interests of those who colonize us. I challenge you to tell me a single country in Europe which is governed by African law. A single country in Europe which is governed by African law. If you can't tell me, why do we allow Roman Dutch law, which does not reflect the views and the aspirations of the majority of the people in this country? Why do we allow that to be a system in place? Why?
In other words, this is another mistake that Judge Hlophe made. In other words, to talk about African law. If you talk about African law now, they are like, we have to deal with this person. There's no way you can talk about African law in South Africa, especially in the South Africa that is busy celebrating the Constitution to say this is the best Constitution in the world. There's no country that has the Constitution like South Africa. Yet South Africa is regarded as the most unequal state in the world. But they have a best Constitution. Now, if you talk about the African law, they're like, no. In other words, you want to change the Constitution now. You want to modify the Constitution. So we don't want anyone to come close to this beautiful Constitution. And again, another thing is that history is not taught in schools, and children are being discouraged to learn about their history in schools. Even old people are not encouraged to learn about their history, where they come from. So that is why in schools it's rare, or maybe you will never find people or students being taught their history or African history before colonialism. Because Judge Hlophe said prior to colonialism, we had African laws, African customary law. Everything was about African law. But now, the system wants us to believe that Africa started 500 years ago. That is why we don't have a history before colonialism. Prior to colonialism, there were cities in Africa. There were villages in Africa. There was life in Africa. Maybe 1,000 years ago, there was life in Africa. There was business in Africa at that time, because civilization started in Africa, then it spread to other parts of the world. So people should know about this history. And at that time, what was governing Africa, it was just African law, African values.
The conclusion is inescapable that that legal system is there to preserve the interests of the privileged white minority in South Africa at the expense of millions of poor black people that we represent in this parliament. It is our considered view that the speech that was delivered by the President yesterday fails on so many fronts. The President mentioned building infrastructure in rural areas. I don't know when that is going to start. He has never done it before. What would make us believe that he would suddenly now focus on rural areas as a priority? Why would he suddenly do that now? You have never done it before, Mr. President. It is our considered view that if we want to bring about fundamental changes, we need to invest in infrastructure, particularly in rural areas. Now the problem is, where is money going to come from? Because we keep borrowing money every day, Mr. President.